You're listening to the Partisan Comms Podcast.
There is a signal broadcast every second of every day through our television sets.
Welcome to episode 14. I'm Terrence. Today we'll be diving into the history of the United States' spy satellite programs. From the early days of the Cold War to the cutting-edge technology of today, we'll look at how these satellites have revolutionized the way intelligence is gathered. Since their inception, satellite programs have been a cornerstone of the United States' intelligence gathering efforts, and have provided critical information on adversaries' military capabilities, strategic intentions, and technological advancements. The late 1950s was a time of intense geopolitical tension between the United States and the Soviet Union. The need for reliable intelligence on Soviet military capabilities was vital, and traditional methods like aerial reconnaissance were proving insufficient to meet all the needs of the intelligence community.
For a moment, let us think back to a point in time, to October the 24th, 1957, to be precise. On that date, the President's Board of Foreign Intelligence Activities submitted its report to President Eisenhower on the status of the intelligence community's collection capabilities. With strong urging from Dr. Edwin Land, the board called for a reassessment of the Air Force's Samos satellite reconnaissance system, then under development by the Air Force. This was a complicated system based on electrical transmissions of images from space. At the same time, the A-12 Oxcart reconnaissance aircraft proposed by CIA was given a careful evaluation. The board held that while both were promising programs, the critical need for intelligence at that point in time warranted an interim photo reconnaissance system that could get into operation earlier than the Samos could be ready. This was a significant decision, particularly for that era. Just 20 days before, the Soviet Union had orbited the world's first satellite, Sputnik 1, from the Churatam range. The United States was still over 3 months away from launching its first small satellite. But the need for reliable intelligence on Soviet missile deployment was becoming more and more urgent. The so-called missile lag debate was already underway, with the Senate Preparedness Subcommittee holding hearings on this issue. The White House responded rapidly to the board's recommendations. Dr. James Killian, who had just assumed his new position as Special Assistant to the President for Science and Technology, arranged a meeting for the first week of December among the President, the Director of Central Intelligence, Mr. Allen Dulles, and the Deputy Secretary of Defense, Mr. Donald Quarles. At this meeting, only 8 weeks after Sputnik 1, the President decided to proceed with a joint CIA Air Force interim photo reconnaissance satellite program to answer the critical intelligence questions about Soviet missiles. The system was to be based on physical recovery of film from the space vehicle. This decision marked the birth of the remarkable Corona project.
In 1957, the Soviet Union launched a satellite named Sputnik 1. It was launched to correspond with a solar period the International Council of Scientific Unions declared would be ideal for the launching of artificial satellites to study Earth and the solar system. However, the Soviet satellite led to concern about a perceived gap between the West's technological capabilities compared to that of the Soviets. As a result of the success of the Sputnik 1 mission, President Eisenhower authorized the Corona program to develop spy satellites to bridge this perceived technological gap. The Corona program was a series of American strategic reconnaissance satellites produced and operated by the Central Intelligence Agency with substantial assistance from the U.S. Air Force. The satellites were used for photographic surveillance of the Soviet Union, China, as well as other areas beginning in June 1959 and ending in May 1972. When the Corona project began, it was cloaked in secrecy, and was publicly referred to under the name Discoverer program as part of a U.S. Air Force satellite reconnaissance program in 1956. The program was based on designs and recommendations from the RAND Corporation, and the goal was to develop a photographic satellite to replace the U-2 spy plane for surveilling the Soviet Union. More specifically, the U.S. was interested in monitoring the production of Soviet missiles as well as the movements of their long-range bombers and other critical intelligence that was previously unattainable through aerial reconnaissance alone. Following the downing of a U-2 spy plane over the Soviet Union in May of 1960, the urgency for the development of reconnaissance satellites was pushed forward. The early missions faced numerous challenges, including technical malfunctions and difficulties in recovering the film capsules. But on August 18, 1960, the first successful mission, Discoverer 14, returned more photographic coverage of the Soviet Union in a single mission than all previous U-2 missions combined. It provided unprecedented insight into Soviet missile sites and other strategic targets, significantly enhancing our understanding of their capabilities. The success of Project Corona paved the way for more advanced satellite programs.
By the summer of 1957, the U-2 had already spent a year in service. It had never been intended as operational for more than a year or two. The operational life expectancy was based on the likelihood that the Soviets would in some months track it successfully, and with accurate tracking data in hand, bring pressures to discontinue the flights. As it turned out, we had misjudged the Soviet air surveillance capability at the time, and their radars had tracked every flight from the first. The Soviets filed a protest, and a stand-down was ordered. After that, overflights were made only sporadically, although for 3 more years, the U-2 ranged over much of the rest of the world. And so we set out on December 8, 1957, to build and develop what has become known as Corona, the world's first photographic reconnaissance satellite. Its importance from today's perspective is momentous. In the weeks after Sputnik 1, there was pressure from all quarters to accelerate the U.S. missile and space program. And there was much public debate about military versus civilian control of the space program. In the perspective of that time, President Eisenhower addressed the nation.
Long-range ballistic missiles, as they exist today, do not cancel the destructive and deterrent power of our strategic air force. The Soviet launching of Earth satellites is an achievement of the first importance, and the scientists who brought it about deserve full credit and recognition. Already, useful new facts on outer space have been produced, and more are on the way as new satellites with added instruments are launched. Earth satellites, in themselves, have no direct present effect upon the nation's security. However, there is real military significance to these launchings, as I have previously mentioned publicly. Their current military significance lies in the advanced techniques and the competence in military technology they imply. For example, the powerful propulsion equipment necessarily used.
On 8 February 1958, the President placed authority for all military space projects under the newly formed Advanced Research Project Agency, ARPA. The splitting off of Corona from Weapons System 117L, the Air Force satellite program, was accomplished by ARPA just 20 days later. At about the time CIA's headquarters was being built, Project Corona was begun. It was decided at the beginning that the photographic subsystem of the Air Force's WS-117L, offering the best prospect for early success, be placed under joint CIA Air Force management, an approach which had been highly successful in covertly developing and operating the U-2s.
Until late 1961, U.S. space launches were not classified. However, the first Corona satellites were cloaked with disinformation, and publicly the U.S. claimed these launches were scientific and engineering missions. The Corona satellites used special 70mm film with a 24-inch focal length camera, which was manufactured by Kodak. The film had a resolution of 170 lines per millimeter of film. Initially, the film was acetate-based and was later replaced by a more durable polyester-based film. Each satellite carried approximately 8,000 feet of film for each camera for a total of approximately 16,000 feet of film. However, over time this changed with a reduction in the thickness of the film stock, which allowed the satellite to carry more film. The cameras were manufactured by the iTech Corporation. The first Corona satellites had a single camera, however, a two-camera system was eventually developed. Additionally, a panoramic lens was chosen for the satellites due to its capability of taking wider-angle images. The camera lens was designed to constantly rotate to counter the effects of blurring as the satellite moved over the planet.
iTech Corporation was a relatively new optical sciences firm formed by a group of scientists from the university research centers in the Boston area. iTech's concept proposed a longer focal length lens for the camera and scanning within an Earth-centered stabilized pod. The decision to turn to this new design was agonizing, for it meant moving from a relatively simple method of stabilization to one that was untried and technically more complicated. The advantages would be lower cost and much greater definition of intelligence targets.
Both cameras were positioned forward and aft on the satellite and tilted at an angle of 15 degrees so they could obtain a stereoscopic image. Improvements in the resolution of the camera systems were rapid, and while some of the early missions could see objects approximately 10 feet in diameter, for example, in later missions the cameras would be able to see objects approximately 5 feet in diameter. The early missions faced numerous challenges, including technical malfunctions and difficulties in recovering the film capsules, but these setbacks led to rapid advancements in satellite technology.
On 16 April 1958, the final project proposal, including the iTech design, was forwarded to the President's Staff Secretary with ARPA's review and approval. The proposal was promptly approved, although never in writing, under the strict security rules surrounding the program. Work on the approved plans commenced immediately. The camera optics were optimally designed, utilizing then new computer graphic techniques. The iTech lens was a 24-inch focal length Petzval design. Early models were f5 speed, and later ones developed to an f3.5 speed. Although of relatively conventional lens element design, these were far from ordinary. At the time the Corona lenses were made, they were equal in quality to any ever previously made. Lens blanks were taken from the finest available glasses and precision ground, checked and mounted to bring out the highest performance then known to optical science.
Project Corona introduced several groundbreaking technologies that revolutionized satellite reconnaissance. The satellites were equipped with high-resolution cameras capable of capturing detailed images of the Earth's surface. The film was then ejected in capsules nicknamed film buckets that re-entered the Earth's atmosphere and were recovered mid-air by specifically equipped aircraft. The film buckets were designed by General Electric, which separated from the satellite and fell to Earth. After surviving the heat from re-entry, the heat shield surrounding the vehicle was jettisoned at approximately 60,000 feet and parachutes were deployed. The capsule was intended to be caught in mid-air by a passing airplane towing an airborne claw, which would then winch it aboard, or it could land at sea. Additionally, a salt plug in the base would dissolve after 2 days, allowing the film bucket to sink if it was not picked up by the U.S. Navy. One of the key innovations was the development of the Keyhole series of satellites, which included various models with progressively improved imaging capabilities. For example, the Keyhole 4 series featured dual cameras that provided stereoscopic images, enhancing the satellite's ability to analyze terrain and structures. The images provided detailed information on Soviet missile sites, airfields, and other military installations, allowing the U.S. to assess the capabilities and intentions of its adversaries. This intelligence helped to dispel myths about the perceived missile gap and provided a more accurate understanding of Soviet strategic capabilities. The success of the project demonstrated the feasibility and importance of satellite reconnaissance, leading to the development of more advanced systems in later years. The program's achievements laid the foundation for modern satellite imaging and surveillance technologies. Its legacy continues to influence contemporary reconnaissance and surveillance efforts, and the technologies and methodologies developed during the program have been refined and expanded upon, leading to the sophisticated satellite systems in use today. As technology progressed, the U.S. developed the Keyhole series of satellites, including the KH-7 Gambit and the KH-9 Hexagon. These satellites featured high-resolution cameras and sophisticated film recovery systems, providing detailed imagery that was crucial for monitoring Soviet missile sites and other strategic targets.
KH stands for keyhole, which is kind of a code word that the CIA came up with for overhead surveillance. Overhead intelligence, meaning from in a plane or space. Back during World War II, for example, there were reconnaissance planes, the B-29, the RC-130. You all know the story of the U-2 and the flights over Cuba where the pilot was shot down, and the SR-71. The problem with airplane reconnaissance is that you can only go so far and then have fuel to return. You can only take photographs of an airfield, for example, and that's about it. And you can make many trips to different airfields. Meanwhile, the enemy, let's say Soviet Union, can fly the plane somewhere else and you'll never see them. So the advantage to orbital photography is that you can see a lot more, cover much more area. So then the Gambit program came along, also for the CIA, used by the NRO. The NRO is the National Reconnaissance Office. They own these satellites, and the photo interpreters who look at the final pictures work with them and two other agencies. Before I go on, okay, and then after Gambit, which was fairly good, came the Hexagon. The task of Hexagon, the CIA came to us in 1965, and they asked us to be able to take photos in stereo of the whole land mass of the Earth with resolution of specific targets, namely Soviet missile bases, tanks, shipyards, ships, airfields, where you could see, have a resolution of about 2 feet from 100 miles away.
The Keyhole series were remarkable for their time. They provided the kind of detailed imagery that was essential for strategic planning and intelligence analysis. Project Corona was declassified in the early 1990s, and while it provided critical intelligence during the Cold War, capturing images of Soviet missile sites and other strategic targets, its success paved the way for the future of satellite reconnaissance.
Many people referring to the program remember the large number of failures that preceded the final success in Discoverer 14. In fact, there were a large number of failures. We had a launch attempt that was aborted on the pad. We had a capsule that was impacted into the Earth in the wrong area. We had an unsuccessful launch where the vehicle did not achieve the proper velocity. We had a capsule which was ejected from the vehicle but went off into a new orbit instead of going into the Earth's atmosphere. We had power failures, we had thermal problems, we had procedural problems, and so forth. Well, while these were a lot of failures, they were also the necessary development to get us to the successes that we eventually needed. We, for example, did prove the booster, we did prove the ground control system, we did prove the orbital operations, we proved the camera, we proved the re-entry body, and finally we proved the overall system. But of course, to all of us that work so closely with the program, government and contractor alike, we did not consider the program a real success until we returned the exposed film to Washington, D.C.
A concurrent program to Corona was SAMOS, which used a different photographic method. This method involved capturing an image on photographic film, developing it aboard the satellite, scanning the image electronically, and then transmitting it to ground stations. SAMOS aimed to provide near real-time photographic and electronic intelligence. From October 1960 to November 1962, the program made approximately 11 launch attempts. The SAMOS satellites were designed to operate in low Earth orbit and represented a significant leap in satellite reconnaissance technology. The satellites featured advanced optical systems capable of capturing detailed images of the Earth's surface. Additionally, the satellites contained sensors which were designed to intercept and analyze radar and communication signals, providing valuable intelligence on Soviet military activities. One of the key innovations of SAMOS was its electronic image transmission capability. This allowed the satellites to send the images back to Earth via radio links, eliminating the need for physical film recovery. This technology was groundbreaking at the time and laid the foundation for future satellite imaging systems. Despite its ambitious goals, SAMOS faced several technical challenges. Early launches encountered issues with satellite stability, image quality, and data transmission. However, these setbacks led to significant improvements in satellite design and engineering. The program's achievements were substantial by enhancing the U.S. military's ability to monitor Soviet activities. The data collected by SAMOS satellites contributed to a better understanding of Soviet missile capabilities and helped inform U.S. defense strategies. In addition to photographic reconnaissance, the U.S. also developed electronic intelligence satellites. Initiatives like the POPI program played a vital role in intercepting and analyzing radar and communication signals from the Soviet Union. These satellites provided valuable data that helped the U.S. develop countermeasures and maintain situational awareness. POPI is the code name given to a series of U.S. intelligence satellites operated by the National Reconnaissance Office. These satellites recorded electronic signals data targeting radar installations in the Soviet Union, as well as Soviet naval ships at sea. The National Security Agency was given the task of collecting, interpreting, and reporting the signals that were intercepted. The POPI program was declassified in September of 2005. However, many details about its operations and full capabilities are still classified. From 1962 to 1971, there were approximately 7 launches of POPI satellites from Vandenberg Air Force Base and continued until August of 1977. Project POPI began as a successor to an earlier satellite program called GRAB, which stands for Galactic Radiation and Background. The GRAB satellites were the first to intercept radar signals from space, but Project POPI aimed to improve upon this capability with more advanced technology and greater coverage.
On the 22nd of June 1960, riding a Thor Able Star booster, GRAB made it into orbit. And for the first time, the U.S. possessed a space reconnaissance program.
It detected S-band radars. And the way the satellite was built, it's basically a sphere. It had 6 round solar panels on it. Also, you will see little white things sticking out of the satellite, and there's 6 of them. We didn't want it to look like an antenna, so what we told everybody was those were temperature sensors. So every time a radar pulse would strike the satellite, it would trigger this multi-vibrator which would modulate the transmitter. So when you put earphones on and listen to it, it had a very distinct sound to it. It sounded like a radar. It had the repetition rate of a radar. We had to build transportable ground stations that were in various locations around the Soviet Union. And it had an antenna that you could steer in azimuth. It actually used a steering wheel from a bus. If the Soviets had known what frequency we were on and had tuned to it, they would have been able to figure out what the hell we were doing.
Intelligence initiatives such as Project Corona, Samos, GRAB, and Poppy have played crucial roles in shaping the nation's defense capabilities. These programs underscore the importance of surveillance in modern military operations and highlight the continuous need for innovation and investment in this field. The landscape of satellite reconnaissance has evolved dramatically. Modern satellites feature digital imaging, real-time data transmission, and advanced sensors. These systems provide comprehensive real-time intelligence that's critical for national security and military operations. The History of U.S. spy satellite programs is a testament to the relentless pursuit of technological innovation and the critical role these systems play in intelligence gathering. From the early days of Project Corona to the sophisticated systems of today, these programs have provided invaluable insights that have shaped national security strategies. Anyway, that's all I have for this episode. Thank you for listening, and if you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, rate, or write a review.
There is a signal broadcast every second of every day through our television sets.
Mark my words, AI is far more dangerous than nukes.
Science and technology are propelling us forward at accelerating rates.
Engines throttling up, 3 engines now at 104%.